Thank Chairman for delaying for half an hour since I had another event. February 2nd, 17 days away, that's Groundhog Day. But here we are trying to celebrate Groundhog Day earlier by repeating something, repeating and repeating and repeating. The Secretary of Interior, their office, has provided 40,000 pages of documents at a cost of $1.5 million to the taxpayers. Yet that's not enough. What are we investigating? Well, we're investigating, just this last week, a hearing on something that OMB did that overruled something the Forest Service did. Well, boy, that's a political conspiracy. Then last week we spent hours on what happened, why did the administration who incompetently hired an incompetent consultant to do an environmental impact statement that was incompetently managed, why did they fire him? Well, because they were incompetent. But no, that we're not done with that investigation yet. There's this idea that somehow deep down inside there's this political conspiracy because this is such a masterful administration that they can hide things and they can manipulate things and do things to the detriment of the American people. Well, guess what? I am here to tell you this administration, in the opinion of this member of Congress, is not politically masterful at anything. Let's, we could just kind of drop it and move on. And there are things that we should be doing, really, guys. I mean, look at, go to our website. There's a page that talks about the jurisdiction of this committee. It's extraordinary, particularly those of us from the West whose states are predominantly owned by the federal government, but it impacts every American and the oceans that surround America. And we aren't spending time legislating in problem areas that impact us. PILT expired. I think some of you probably heard about that from some of your constituents. Pretty darn critical to people in the western U.S., but those PILT payments actually go to, I think, almost every state. Some get very small amounts. And yet it has expired, and is the committee here putting together a task force or holding a hearing or proposing legislation to fix PILT? And we have passed some legislation that deals with forest management, but there's a lot more to do in that area. I have a particular set of federal lands in my district, the O&C lands. These things really need attention, but they're not getting attention. In one of my former lives, I was a counselor, and I have decided to do a little diagnosis today outside the scope of my licensure, and I have decided that the committee has an obsessive-compulsive disorder. And I'd like to move beyond the obsessive-compulsive disorder. Now, I'll just give some examples of what we should be considering today. H.R. 3886 that would take care of the problem we had a hearing on this week. It would refund the SRS payments that we're fighting over whether or not they should be exacted back from counties, and it would make certain that no SRS payments in the future are subject to sequestration. That's within the realm of this committee. We could be passing that legislation. 3879, Ms. Kirkpatrick. Which would reauthorize the PILT program, as I mentioned, pretty darn important to a lot of us here. H.R. 666, Mr. Unfortunate number, but Mr. Grijalva, Ms. Hanabusa, Mr. Pallone, we don't assign the numbers, Ms. Songas, and Mr. Faleomavaenga, which would reaffirm the ability of the Department of the Interior, we might have to investigate this one, to take lands into trust for tribes. It's called the Carcieri fix. That affects a lot of the members here today. S. 1237, Bipartisan Omnibus Territories Act. H.R. 361, Doc's colleague Reichert, Representative Reichert, Alpine Lakes Wilderness. H.R. 163, Benishek, Sleeping Bear Dunes. 433, Amadei, Pine Forest. 2208, Whitman Dingle. 2646, Herrera, Butler, Huffman. The Economy of Fisheries in the Pacific Act. 863, Maloney, Blackburn, National Women's History Museum. 706, Cicilline, McGovern, Blackstone River Valley National Historic Park. 664, Maffei, Harriet Tubman, as well as 745, 3780, Mr. Holt, Ocean Energy. 1351, Mr. Grijalva, Public Land Service Corps. Mr. Costa, 1677. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, having listed all these bills, which have been actively introduced, most of them bipartisan, I would ask a unanimous consent that these measures be added to the agenda for this business meeting.
I'll object to that unanimous consent request. Yeah.